Tell them hi. Okay, thank you. Tell them hi. Thank you, boo-boo. Thank you. Hey, hi, hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess, and I'm here to tell you about my most surprising reads of 2020. So I had a really great reading year last year, and there were some books that I was expecting to be great, and they were, and some I went into with low expectations or none at all, or honestly, I was like, I'm gonna hate this book, and they blew me away. And so I'm really excited to talk about those today. So I'm going to start with an entire trilogy that I read last summer, and I have this really ugly copy, but it's His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. I just got this bound up, like at Goodwill, probably for $2. I've heard about this for years. I know there was a movie called The Golden Compass. I never watched it, but yeah, I was like, well, I've had this on my shelf for years. I probably should read it. Also, Emily Fox, Books with Emily Fox, loves this. She said that she reread it as an adult and that it held up. So I was like, I'm gonna give it a chance. So in the US, the books are The Golden Compass, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass. But in the UK, where it's originally published, I believe, the first one is Northern Lights, I believe, instead of The Golden Compass, whatever. So I loved these books. They're following this main character named Lyra, and in this world, it's very similar to our world. Everyone has demons, but it's not like a bad thing. It's kind of like your familiar or a part of your soul, but in animal form. So when you're younger, it can change form. It could be a bird, it could be a ferret, it could be a snake. But at a certain time, basically when you're like transitioning to adulthood, kind of teenage, puberty, whatever, it chooses one form and it stays in that form until you die. So the demons, like I said, are basically like an extension of your soul. You cannot be apart from them for too long, so in that world. But her parents have died a long time ago. She has a mysterious uncle who's like an explorer, but he's always off doing something. So she's basically raised and educated by the scholars at Oxford. And so she meets a young man who's from London, but like regular London. So like in a place where people don't have demons. And the stories really follow their adventures together because there is this woman who is out to gather up all these children, and she's doing these experiments and no one's really sure what's going on. And they call her and the people who work with her grabbers because they're just snatching kids and kids are going missing. And one of Lyra's friends gets taken, and so she is trying to find him. She ends up finding this boy from the other world who is trying to hide from some people in his world. And you see how their stories intersect and how there's people who are after them and how that's related. And there's also themes and questions about religion, organized religion, because the people who are snatching up these kids are working for the church. And so there's a lot going on. Like I said, I read these for the first time as an adult and I thought they were excellent. I thought the themes and the questions they brought up were really great. I really loved the characters of Lyra and I think it's Will. Yes, Lyra and Will. I thought they were so precious. I loved Lyra's demon and all of the different characters they meet because there's armored polar bears, there are witches, there are these things I cannot even explain that they meet in the third book, I think, that are like wood thingies. They're like kind of like trees, but kind of not. So to me, it was really fun and I got really attached and really emotional. There was this part, I think in the second book, where I don't want to spoil it, but they're somewhere different and it was great to me. So it was very emotional to me. I read all three. I love them. I've started the adaptation on HBO and I think it's great so far. So I don't know. If you've thought about reading them, I would recommend reading them because they're great. This one I do not own, and that's Pure Nessie by Susanna Clark. This book is so strange. I really didn't know much about it. I liked the cover and I read like one line of the blurb and I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. Also, it's like 240 pages, but I don't even know how to explain it, but it was such a weird, whimsical, sad, happy story that I've kept thinking about long after I finished it. And it's really pure Nessie in this place that's basically endless. And there's just all these halls and caverns. And he just explores all the time and collects information. And he just wants to learn about it. And at the very bottom, there's water. And at the very top, there's clouds. So this place is really the entire world. And there's only one other person who lives there with him. And you go through pure Nessie and his interactions with this other person who is not as happy and positive as pure Nessie is, because he's very much a positive person. Like, what am I going to get up and explore today? I'm going to learn today. Very much like that. And the other person's very grumpy. And it's him, exploring his world. But then I don't even want to say, because it might be in the blurb, but I think it would be to give away what happens, something that changes his daily routine and makes him question things about where he is and what his life has meant. And I thought it was great. The longer I think about it, the more I enjoy it. And it really was something I had to sit with for a while, listen to other people's reviews. But to me, it was great. And so it was a big surprise because I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. And it ended up being a really fun reading experience. Next, I have Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. This is a memoir about her time working at a crematorium. And I heard about this on Paperback Bones channel, I think. She brought it up a few times and I was like, why does she keep bringing up this book? It sounds so weird. So I got the audiobook from the library and I don't know what I was expecting, but I loved this. And if you've watched any of my other videos, I've mentioned Caitlin Doughty a few times. She also has a YouTube channel, but this book just kind of spurred my interest to, this sounds so weird, explore death, talk about death, the death industry, especially in America. And I think it's something we don't talk about a lot that we should. And this kind of was my jump start to that. And now have definitely gotten into more nonfiction about this topic because of this book. So it was really pleasant surprise. So obviously when people get cremated, there's people who have to push them into the fires, but she goes into that, just like what it's like working there, the people she worked with, families that she dealt with, different bodies and things that happened. But then it's more than that. And I don't want to say more because I want you to read it. She narrates the audiobook, so I would recommend getting the audio, but I think this is really great. And really, it's short. It's not, obviously if you don't want to hear about death, and she does talk about cremating people from babies to elderly, so be cautious of that going into it, but I still really recommend this book if you're interested. The majority of the rest of the books on this list I do not own, so I have Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna McGuire. For the longest time I was hearing about this series and people kept describing it as like portal fantasy and books about kids who come back from portal fantasies and don't know how to live in the real world. And for some reason I was like, I don't care, that does not sound good to me. Then Tor, they were sending out emails with free ebooks of the first 5 books because the 6th one comes out in January. And I was like, why the hell not? It's free, download it all 5. And I read the first one, which is Every Heart a Doorway, and I loved it. My only complaint is that they're too short because they're all novellas and I want more. It's so precious. It is. The first one starts with like this home for children, wayward children. So think Narnia, how they stumble through the wardrobe and go into another world. It's kids whose world opens for them, whether that be a doorway or they fall through a trap door or whatever, where they're meant to be, but then somehow they end up back in the real world and then they may or may not be able to find their door again. So this home is for them because obviously they've been living in some kind of mystical world for all these years, and now their families are expecting them to just fit in right back into their normal life, and that doesn't work. So they go to this home and there's kids from like really happy lollipop bubblegum kind of worlds where everything's nonsense and fun, and then some who went to like the land of the dead and like really dark worlds. And so it's a very interesting mixture of characters because of all their different personalities and the places that they went. And so that's the first one. And then I don't think you have to read them all in order, but I am. The second one, then the other books tend to follow certain characters. So the second one follows sisters Jack and Jill, and their story is a little darker, and I really love them and their story. But I was just so pleasantly surprised by Every Heart a Doorway. I literally read it in one sitting and I was like, okay, I get it now. I understand. So that was really a really great surprise. And thank you, Tor, for sending out those free ebooks. Okay, then I read Nevermoor, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. What? So this is a middle grade fantasy that I had heard of for a few years, and I was like, whatever. So this year when I was reading a little bit more middle grade, I was like, okay, I'm finally going to give this one a chance. And basically Morrigan has been told her whole life that she's going to die when she turns 11, I think. And her family's just really, negative. And they're like, well, no need to get your hopes up for such and such because you're going to die on this. And her family's just the worst. And anyway, so on the eve of when she's supposed to die, or right before she's supposed to die, she's like rescued by this random dude and taken away to this world, and she doesn't know what's going on, and like, so am I gonna die or am I not gonna die? And so she's in this different world called Nevermoor, and there's a talking cat, and there's other children, and so essentially there's a magical school. However, you have to pass these trials to be able to get into the school. So this story is following the trials that she has to go through in order to get into the school, and it was so much fun. So it was fun, it was whimsical, it was heartfelt, and I was like, I think I'm obsessed. And so I want to read the next two really soon. So there's 3 out so far. Someone told me that it's supposed to be a 9-book series, but there's supposed to be like 3 trilogies within the overall world. So I don't know if they're all going to follow Morrigan Crow, or if the next one will start with a different character, but I'm really excited to read the next 2 because I've heard they only get better, and I'm pumped. So then I read All That Remains, and this is by Dame Sue Black. So after I talked about Loving Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, a friend on Bookstagram recommended this to me. This is another memoir, and it's following her life growing up. She started working in like maybe her early teens in a butcher shop to now her life as a forensic anthropologist. So Dame Professor Sue Black or Professor Dame Sue Black? I don't know the order. So she is from Scotland, and she grew up in northern Scotland, around or in Inverness. And so it's really interesting, obviously, that she had this kind of early contact with death working at a butcher shop, and she kind of just always had this feeling that she would be better working with the dead than with the living. And I'm like, I feel you. I feel you. And so in college, she ended up studying, I think she went with anatomy, and then she got into forensic anthropology. Forensic anthropologists are essentially when a person dies, and they're most likely when they're not able to be identified because maybe all of their identifiable parts are gone, or they just have bones. They are called in to study those bones and, try to give a profile to that person. And that's just a very basic overview of what they do, because they can do a lot of different things. She was a professor. Now she's like a chancellor at Lancaster University, I think. But so she was a professor of forensic anthropology. So she taught anatomy. She also consulted on cases with, I think, Scotland Yard, and has also worked abroad when there have been massive disasters. So this book, I was just like, is this my life calling? Is this the career field I'm supposed to go in? I'm really feeling a pull there. I've been trying to get my hands on everything about forensic anthropology, about forensics. Like I said, the book by Caitlin really spurred this interest. And so that's where I am now, but it was excellent. It was just an excellent story because she also talks about death, trying to die the good death, her experiences with, the death of her parents, and also at the university that she taught at, which is the University of Dundee in Dundee, Scotland. They have they're one of the only schools in the UK that have, where people can donate their body to science. And so their anatomy students actually get to practice and study on actual bodies and not just on model. And so I think that is fascinating. And they recently, within the last couple of years, upgraded like their anatomy facility, and they changed the way that they preserve the bodies, which is super interesting to me. So I think it's an excellent book. She has another one called Written in Bone that I want to read. And like I said, when I grow up, I want to be a forensic anthropologist. I want to go to the University of Dundee. So, that's where I'm trying to get to. Then I have In a Holidays by Christina Lauren, and I'm so happy this is on the list. The last two Christina Lauren books, oh my God. The last two Christina Lauren books I had read before this were the Honey Don't list or the Honey Do list and Twice in a Blue Moon. And Twice in a Blue Moon was okay. I liked the first half, but not the second. So I think I maybe gave it 3 stars. The Honey Don't list, I DNF'd because I just was bored. So it was like, I don't know. I was really nervous going into this one, so I wasn't expecting much, but I love this one so much. And it's a Christmas love story, but it's like romance meets Groundhog's Day. So essentially the main character, her family and another family, they have this ritual of going to, is it Park City, Utah? Every year for Christmas, they stay in this big cabin together. And one of the family's sons, she's always had a crush on. And so she ends up, her first Groundhog Day that she wakes up, this whole trip is going, normal, but she ends up drunkenly making out with the brother. So not the one she actually likes. And she wakes up, she's mortified, but then she's on her way back home, gets into a car accident, wakes up on the plane, and they're heading back to the cabin to start it all over again. And she's like freaking out, of course. She's like, what is happening? So it is Groundhog's Day mixed with that, but I just loved the family aspect, all of them getting together to go to the cabin, the fun they had, whether game night or sledding, building snowmen. It was just so like warm and perfect for the Christmas season. I love the romance and the love interest, and I just loved every bit of it. It just made me smile the entire time, and I was like, okay. I will say though, if you go into it expecting a lot of smut or, some naughty scenes, that is my only complaint about the book, is there aren't any, but it was just so good that I didn't care. So just be cautious going into it. If you, want some sexy times, there's not really sexy time, but it was great. And I was like, now I'm hopeful that Christina Lauren are back to their normal writing style, because I loved it. The last one on this list is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I'm not going to hold this up the whole time though. So now, if you watched my reading vlog about this book, I was skeptical. I kept hearing everyone talk about it, hype it up, because V.E. Schwab has been writing this book for 10 years. And she just, didn't feel like she was in the right place to finish it. And so she took her time until she felt ready to finish this book. So I've been hearing about this book all year long, everyone hyping it up. And I'm like, whatever. Because I read Vicious by V.E. Schwab, loved it. But A Darker Shade of Magic, didn't like, and I didn't like Vengeful. So I was like, I don't know. So I went into it, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to read it. I'm going to do a reading vlog, and I'm just going to be ranting. That's what it's going to be. It's going to end up being a ranting vlog, and I was ready. And then I was reading it, and I was like, oh, okay, this is fine. Okay, this is good. Okay, this is really good. And I ended up loving it. I'm like, I'm ashamed. I'm not ashamed, but I was really expecting not to like it. But this is her best writing thus far, in my opinion. I love the story. It is not for everyone, though, because it is very character and thematically driven. There is a plot, but is not as plot driven as something maybe like A Darker Shade of Magic. But Addie LaRue is about a girl who is immortal, but people can't remember her. So it's 300 years of her going through life not being remembered. But then she meets someone who can remember her, and that starts a whole new thing. And so for me, what touched me the most was just the impact and the thought of not being able to be remembered, to not be able to do anything and leave, and to leave any kind of imprint behind, to leave any kind of legacy. Like someone can't even go to sleep and wake up and remember her. She is forgotten. That means you can't have any meaningful relationships with friends or family. And then Henry, who is the person who can finally remember her, brings in a whole nother conversation, because he himself is going through things and questioning life and choices, and how do I make these choices when there's so many endless ones out there, and knowing what's right, feeling like you're the outsider in your family. And I'm like, why is she yelling at me right now? This is me. So it was just very relatable for me. It was so touching, and I was so pleasantly surprised by it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. But those were my most surprising books this year or for 2020. Did you have any books that really surprised you? Surprised you in a good way or maybe in a bad way? Or did you read any of these books? Let me know down below in the comments. I hope you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.